Welcome back into the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast here on Monday, June 10th, 2019. Big day in sports today. NBA Finals game number 5 is tonight. At the time I'm recording this, the game has not happened. Don't know if the Warriors prolong this series, take it back to Golden State, or if the Raptors have captured their first NBA championship. I want to talk about the NBA today, but not the finals. I want to touch on Anthony Davis. More on that in a second. Just want to let you know that you guys can listen to this podcast on all of your favorite platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. This one is available, as well as on JacksonNeillPodcast.com. So basically, wherever you want to check this out, there's a place for you to do that. Now, jumping into the NBA, where Anthony Davis, trade talks surrounding him are starting up again. And after kind of a lull in the season, when the trade deadline passed and trades were no longer available, we stopped hearing the kind of rumors. We stopped hearing all the discontent there down in New Orleans for the big star. But now they've started up again with trades about to be able to start back up again in the league. And they're saying, sources right now are saying that the Pelicans are open to a multi-year deal. And looking back on this past trade deadline, lots of people, including myself, said that the Pelicans should not take a trade, the Lakers trade that they were offering them. And looking back on that, it was a mistake. If you were the Pelicans at that point in time, and you knew that you were going to get the number 1 overall pick, I think you had to take that deal and give Zion Williamson a solid core around him, but you don't know that as a franchise. So you can't really blame them in that instance. But going forward now, you have to, as a franchise, think about what exactly you want from this trade. And I think the outcome of this trade with Anthony Davis has switched up a little bit. Because before you got rid of Anthony Davis, the idea was kind of, okay, maybe you had to get like a young star in the deal, that maybe it was more quality over quantity, that maybe if you could get somebody like Jason Tatum, that was more important than getting all the kind of players you could get from the Lakers. That if you could get that one young star player, because that's sometimes the hardest thing to get, if you could get that one young star guy, that would be the deal you would look for. Now, with getting the number 1 overall pick and barring any, crazy trades or anything like that, the Pelicans are going to get Zion Williamson. They are going to have that top-tier player. I mean, he's the best prospect to come out since Anthony Davis. He looks to be a surefire bet at number 1 overall. He looks to be the young star that you can build a franchise around. So, with that in mind, if you're the Pelicans, you now have to look and say, okay, we need to build a team around Williamson. Is that we need to give him pieces in order to develop as a superstar player. Because I think another thing that people need to realize is the fact that, yes, Williamson is the best player. He is an amazing prospect and one we, like I said, haven't seen since Davis. I mean, he has been drawing parallels to LeBron James. That's the type of level that Zion Williamson is at. But I think we also have to keep in mind that he's not LeBron. And that very few players, I mean, LeBron's pretty much the only one, were able to either come right out of high school or 1 year of college and dominate and really provide solid production in the NBA in year 1. That there are growing pains, even for LeBron, there are growing pains for every single player, and that takes time to develop. And I think one player you can look at is Anthony Davis. That surefire kind of prospect that wasn't a bust. You go back and you look at what he's been able to do over his career thus far and where he is right now, he's not a bust. He is entering that conversation for top 5 players in the NBA, starting to branch into that number 1 overall player. The reason, though, that he hasn't gotten to that number 1 overall player stage yet or cracked into that top 5 yet was the organization he was at, the same one that's now going to get a shot at Zion Williamson. And I think that's the important thing that the Pelicans have to realize getting Williamson now, is that they had this shot just several years ago, and you could say they screwed it up. You get a player like Anthony Davis, a generational type talent, and what have they done? Besides one semi-all-right playoff run last year, what have they done? Where have they gone? How much have they competed? And I think that kind of goes back to the fact of what did you do to build a team around him? And besides getting Drew Holiday, which was able to get him a playoff series win before losing to the Warriors, you didn't really get Anthony Davis all that much. You didn't really build a team around him. And now getting Zion, the important thing is to realize, okay, yes, Zion is a top-tier prospect. He is the guy in this draft. He is the guy we've seen since Davis. How do you take that and make him become one of the top players in the league in the most effective and the quickest way possible? And that starts with getting him a solid team around him. Is that understanding, okay, for 2 to 3 years after you get Zion, he's not going to be a top 10 player in the NBA. There is no way. I don't see that happening. He's coming into the league at about 19 years old. I think he has so many great parts about his game, but there's still so much for him, so many aspects for him to develop. Yes, he's an athletic monster, but I think he could still even improve athletically. I think there's so much of his game that can still be improved, and that's just crazy to say considering his talent level and his skill level already. But you need to give him that time to develop, and you need to give him the time to, not only the time, but the best situation possible. And that starts for a player like Zion, especially get him a good point guard. Get him a younger point guard that he can grow with, that they can mature together. Get him some other solid pieces surrounding him. Some other young guys who they can all kind of grow and develop together. Who they can all kind of say, hey, look, this is something that isn't done that much in professional sports anymore, but it's so important. Hey, we don't expect to compete for 2-3 years. 3 years, really. Go out there, play a couple seasons, get some experience under your belt, and develop your game and get onto that NBA level. Because think about it, in 3 years, Zion, what is he going to be, like 21, 22? That's not old whatsoever. You can take that time, and I think the Pelicans have to realize that, is that now they have a player like Davis, whereas before in previous trades, before they knew they got Zion, they might have tried to get that young star. They have that. They have the young star that they can build a team around, that you can build a franchise around. Not only is he a star player on the court, he's a star in terms of his profile. He's really a big kind of star player. So, looking at that now, you need to make the right trade for Davis. Is that I don't think you can go back to the Lakers, and they're not going to give you Ingram, that top pick, ball, all of the assets that they were offering you. But they will still offer you some. You got to look at a team like the Celtics. What other young assets can they offer them? Other teams around the league, who is offering the younger kind of guys, those younger pieces that you can use to develop a basketball team? Because the thing about the NBA is that when you get a young star like Zion, you need to understand that give him the time to develop in a good setting, in a setting where he can improve and he'll want to stay with your organization, and that when he's ready, he's going to recruit that free agent. Is that if you've developed that kind of relationship where he's become that kind of player in your city where he doesn't want to leave and he'll offer to recruit somebody, look how much stars move in the NBA nowadays. Can you even imagine what it's going to be like? Like, imagine 5 years ago in the NBA and now, and how much more stars move around. Imagine in another 5 years the kind of turnover we're going to be seeing in free agency. Even if it stays the same, there's still multiple stars every single year that change teams. So the fact that you've gotten your number one guy on your team that you think can carry your franchise for good reason, you think that, you need to get the pieces around him, let him develop, then when he's ready, when he's at that superstar, when he's reaching the superstar level, that his superstar potential, you go out and you get that free agent. You free up the necessary cap space and you get that other max guy to pair him with. Or two. And hopefully then the other young players that you have as well, maybe one of them can develop into another really good player. Maybe they don't even need to be a superstar, but they can still be a really good point guard. Or a really good center. Or whatever you need for your team. Or a knockdown shooter from the outside. But as the Pelicans, you need to look at what you did with Davis. Look at what happened the last time you got that number one overall prospect, that once every decade type player, and look at how you screwed that up. Then you need to take what you learned from that instance, and you then need to apply it to Zion and kind of do the opposite and kind of say, okay, moving forward, here's how we're going to make sure that we get Zion the best possible way for him to succeed and not only become a great player, because Davis has become a great player, but as soon as he becomes a really good player, he wants to leave because he never was able to win in New Orleans because the ownership, the management, the team, the franchise never built a squad around him. You need to do that for Zion from the very beginning. It's so hard to keep stars, and I think for the Pelicans, that's going to be something they're going to have to keep an eye on going forward now that they got the Zion Williamson, presumably in the draft, barring any trades or anything. That'll wrap it up for this episode of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, you can check this podcast out on all your favorite platforms, as well as jacksonneillpodcasts.com. Link to that down in the show notes. Also, I have other podcasts. Anything Goes with Jackson Neill, my interview podcast, the music podcast I do discussing music. Make sure to check those podcasts out as well on the same exact website. Then, if you really like the content and you want to support the show and me as well, go over to Patreon. Link to that also down in the show notes, where you can become a subscriber and get access to kind of cool bonus content for as little as $1 a month. So make sure you go over to Patreon and support this podcast. I kind of host, direct, produce, whatever you want to call it, all by myself. I'm a college student, so any little bit of support really, really goes a long way. Then lastly, make sure to check me out on social media at Jackson Neill 20. Finally, links to those in the show notes. I promise those are the last links down there. But make sure to check me out on Twitter and Instagram as well to keep up to date on all my podcasts I'm releasing and everything else I like to publish. Well, that'll do it. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you all next time.